All right, well, I show about 101, so let's jump in. Anybody else can catch up with us as we go along. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our continuing Planning Analytics webinar series. This webinar will focus on the migration from TM1 to Planning Analytics, as well as some of the new features and roadmaps included in Planning Analytics as it moves forward. It'll also help to address some of the challenges and the opportunities that you're going to have as you plan for your migration. Rod, want to go to the next slide? All right, let me cover first off a couple of frequently asked questions. Always, will I be able to get a copy of these slides? And is today's event being recorded? And the answer to both of those questions is yes. You'll be sent out links to this webinar afterwards. Okay. Next. All right, you'll also have the ability to ask questions during the presentation by simply clicking the Q&A menu down there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. We encourage questions. It's meant to be an interactive type event. We'd love to be able to get to every single one. Type in your questions, hit enter, and as I said, we'll do our best. If we run into a time issue, we will make sure to answer every question and get back to you individually as after the webinar. Okay. First, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters. My name's John Persisto. I'm the Client Success Manager here with Revelwood. And I've got with me Rob Gordy, who is our Vice President and Chief Technology Officer. And Rob has really been spearheading our upgrades and migrations for several years now from TM1 to Planning Analytics. And while I don't want to say he's seen it all, he's seen a lot. So jump into the next slide. Okay, for our agenda today, first, I'm going to give just a quick overview of Revelwood. I'll hand it over to Rob at that point to go over a little bit about what's new, and as we discuss the future and the different options, and then our migration approach and some other things to think about. So just a quick introduction to those of you that are new and don't know Revelwood. We are an IBM Analytics premier partner. We cover a broad range, a broad spectrum of business analytics solutions. We've got particular expertise in the Office of Finance, covering all things related to financial planning and reporting. And you'll see a note there, our 25-year history. We've helped hundreds of Fortune 100 and mid-sized clients incorporate analytics into their everyday thinking. And our ability to speak business first helps us understand your biggest challenges so we can build solutions that help you gain a competitive advantage and drive improved outcomes. With that, I would like to pass this over to Rob and let him jump right into the webinar and move us along from there. Rob?
Excellent. So, John, thank you for that great introduction. Hope everybody's doing well today, keeping safe, keeping healthy. We're going to get right into the meat of this presentation. So starting with what is new in Planning Analytics, you'll note that I quoted new. That's because Planning Analytics now is about 3 to 4 years old. Came out in late 2016. So these features on this slide that I'm talking about are kind of the features that it's had for 3 years now, although I will say all 3 of these have been improved over those 3 years, especially the 2 new user interfaces. So going through this, before I dig in, I want to recognize that the people on this call, the people attending, your companies might be in various stages of migrating to Planning Analytics. There are still a lot of companies out there that are using TM1 10 dot whatever. They're using the older TM1. But a lot of you might have already migrated to Planning Analytics, but you haven't done everything. You haven't started using Workspace or Planning Analytics for Excel. So this presentation is for all of you, okay? And I will try to give advice to specific audiences as we go along. But let me start with what's new in Planning Analytics, what Planning Analytics has that TM1 did not have. So it is important that everybody knows that Planning Analytics has everything that TM1 10.x has, Okay, so if you're used to using perspectives and TM1 web and even TM1 applications or the old connector contributor interface, Planning Analytics has all of that. It also has the three things that are up here. Two of them are new user interfaces. One is called Workspace. It is a web-based interface. It is meant for both dashboards as well as data entry and reporting. And it's completely self-service. Your average Excel user would easily be able to create their own dashboard in Workspace. Then we have Planning Analytics for Excel. What that is a completely new interface or add-in to Excel. When I say new, I'm comparing it to perspectives, which you might be used to. So Planning Analytics for Excel, again, has everything that perspectives has, in the sense that if you're used to using perspectives and it has those formulas that you might be used to, DBR formulas, DBRW formulas, all of that will work in Planning Analytics for Excel. But it has a lot of new features and a much nicer user interface, at least in my opinion. Most importantly, it works very well over a wide area network. The last thing I want to just mention are hierarchies. So on the back end, in the TM1 database, they created this concept of virtual dimensions. It's this idea that if you, for example, have a product dimension and you're tracking data by product, if you have attributes on that product, let's say color or size or style or whatnot, whatever the attributes of the product are, you are able to, on the fly, almost create new dimensions and do analysis based on those attributes. Okay, and that's what Hierarchies gives you. In the end, it results in smaller models, better use of memory, better performance overall. Okay, let's keep going. So one thing I want to share, as I said, the last slide talked about things that I've been talking about for years. This slide actually is pretty up to date. So IBM has been working furiously on Planning Analytics over this time. They are constantly upgrading, especially the PACS, Planning Analytics for Excel, and Workspace interfaces. And those are being improved all the time in performance and stability. Some of the areas where they are looking into the future. First of all, right now, you can have Planning Analytics either in the cloud, paying IBM an annual fee, or local and buying the license like you've done in the past. There are many sub-options within there. I'm going to cover them in just a few minutes. But some of those options have to do with whether you're using Windows or Linux on a local installation. And it also includes a new thing called Cloud Pak for Data. And again, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. IBM has also decided that the Workspace interface that they created, while it was, in my opinion, miles ahead of TM1 Web, and it provided as I was saying before, a nice user interface for end users to be able to create their own dashboards and do ad hoc analysis all in a web browser. I thought all that was great, but they were lacking in the sophistication of their visualizations. And they recognize that, and they recognize they already have a product that does a much better job of that, being Cognos Analytics. So IBM is going to be reworking the Planning Analytics Workspace user interface. It will start looking a lot more like Cognos Analytics, and it will have many more features, especially in terms of visualizations. And it will literally share components with Cognos Analytics. Finally, I want to mention they're working on two very specific features and they've been having webinars on this. I do recommend that you attend the IBM webinars if you don't already. One of them is on AI, augmented intelligence or artificial intelligence integration. So it's this idea of using machine learning to look at the history of your actuals and budgets, and for it to recommend what your budget should look like. Okay, it's kind of like having a co-pilot, and so you're not simply putting in budget numbers blind. You have an intelligent predictive engine saying, well, based on your history, these figures, this makes sense for these figures. And of course, you can override it. That's one new big feature. The other big feature is workflow. So for those who use Contributor, or TM1 applications, as it's also called, you might be familiar with some level of workflow where you kind of go in and you say, okay, I want to work on this department, and then you are filling in various views or templates. So the goal, IBM is completely rewriting or reworking that concept. But in the end, what you're going to get is something where a TM1 administrator will be able to create paths for the users. And let's say you're talking about a department manager, you'll be able to say, okay, the first thing you need to do is your staff plan. And it'll automatically bring up the workbook for that. And then when they're done with that, it'll bring up the capital expense planning or the revenue planning. And then finally, maybe general expenses. It'll bring them through a workflow, and it will let the administrator know where people are in that workflow. So it should help manage your budgeting process whenever you do it. All right. So moving on, I want to dig a little bit under the hood here. So we're going to be talking about how you can install and use planning analytics. Okay, and there are two big categories. You're either going to do something local, where you own the license, you license it the way you would have in the 10.x days, or you're going to subscribe and have a cloud instance. Okay, I want to stress. So first of all, this diagram shows kind of how you can go into either of these environments. Very few people had TM1 Cloud back 4 or 5 years ago, but obviously TM1 Cloud, you could migrate directly into Planning Analytics on the cloud. But for those of you who are on-prem and you're running 10. Whatever, you can either upgrade and stay on-prem and install the software on-prem, or you can do the same and install on the cloud. Not install, but migrate to the cloud. Okay, and there are versions of both Planning Analytics Enterprise and Planning Analytics Express, right? The big difference being the licensing, how many people you're allowed to have in your system. By the Express version, Planning Analytics Express, has a limit of 50 users. And that's the primary difference. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the differences. In particular, I listed the benefits of each. Okay, so you can read this as I'm talking, but generally speaking, the benefits of going local is that, first of all, it likely is the devil you know, right? So you probably already have TM1 installed locally, in which case it's a very smooth migration, and you're able to control it. You're able to say, for example, I want to continue to use perspectives for the next year, but I want to be on a version that is supported by IBM. And that's something I forgot to mention in the prior slide. For those of you who don't know, version 10.x is not supported by IBM anymore. And when I say not supported, what I mean is you can call them and they will try to help you, but they are not going to be making bug fixes to that software. So So, it's in your best interest to move to planning analytics. Like I said, if you're doing it locally, it could be as easy as, basically, you could ignore all the new features and just install the new TM1 database engine and the new version of perspectives, and totally ignore workspace and packs. So, this is what I was saying earlier on. Planning Analytics has everything that TM1 had. So you have perspectives and architect and TM1 web, and you could upgrade and simply keep using those. But by upgrading, you're allowing yourself in the long run to start using these other interfaces. If you go up to cloud, the big benefit there is that you don't have to worry about the servers. You don't have to worry about upgrading, right? So I will tell you right now, IBM is putting out new releases almost on a monthly basis. Let's say it's every 6 weeks. So that means that, if you want the latest and greatest features, the easiest way to do that is to go with a cloud subscription. Okay, so that's the one of the big advantages of going that way. All right, we're going to keep this moving. When we're talking about cloud, really there are a couple of options there. The main one is subscribing to PA Cloud. Okay, PA Cloud, first of all, has been around even longer than PA because TM1 Cloud existed. It is very, very stable, very well managed by IBM. It includes all of the components, right? So it includes Planning Analytics Workspace and Planning Analytics for Excel. It also has TM1 Web, and even as an administrator, you could even use Architect and Perspectives by signing in via remote desktop. Then there's a new offering, relatively new. And you may have heard IBM, you may have gotten emails about this. It's called Cloud Pak for Data. And what this is that IBM is creating this, this offering that is based on Red Hat's OpenShift software foundation. And what that is for those of you who are a bit technical, it is a platform that uses Kubernetes containers, okay, and is very flexible, and it is the best platform in my opinion for scaling. So if you want to go from having 50 users to having 500, a lot of my clients actually have 9 months a year where they're using 20 users, and then out of nowhere for 3 months they have 200 or 500 users. Okay, and that's very common, where you have a small group that are using it year-round, and then a much, much larger group that needs to just enter data for the budget or maybe the forecasts. In those instances, the best way to use your resources is to have a scalable model. And that is where IBM is going. So they created this Cloud Pak for Data. And it doesn't only it is one platform that allows for planning analytics, but you can also have Cognos analytics. You can also have Watson and machine learning like SPSS, or databases like DB2 and Hadoop. And you can put all these things together in this environment called Cloud Pak for Data. And Cloud Pak for Data can either be hosted by, let's say, IBM, or you could have it on your private network, or you could use Amazon, Amazon Web Services, or Google Cloud. So you don't need to use IBM's cloud to use Cloud Pak for Data. Okay. The big negative is that right now, as of today, the planning analytics experience in Cloud Pak for Data is very limited. It is limited to using Planning Analytics Workspace and Planning Analytics for Excel But within Planning Analytics for Excel, you're not able to use those familiar DBRW type formulas. You have to use the other parts of Planning Analytics for Excel. So as of this minute, we're currently, by the way, in July of 2020, it is limited. IBM is working on that aggressively, and they are going to have something much more complete in the future. All right. For those of you who use who have TM1 installed locally, TM1 10 dot whatever, this is what your environment looks like right now. Okay, you have Architect, Perspectives, and TM1 Web. Those are your main interfaces. TM1 Web, you could also include TM1 Contributor in that. TM1 Applications. Those talk to two services. One is your main TM1 server. The other is the web server. Okay, this is what it currently looks like. If you upgrade to Planning Analytics, again, you're going to see it's very obvious. You are only going to be adding to this. So just to go back and forth a bit, this is current, this is new. All you're doing is adding what's on the right-hand side. So you're adding that new PACS interface, you're adding workspace, and you're adding a new service, new server. Okay, and we're going to talk about that server in 1 minute. Okay, so let's talk about those services, right? That we have. So let's start with the database service, right? The familiar TM1 database server. Okay. First of all, in Planning Analytics, you're going to want to install that in Windows Server 2016 or 2019. Okay. And in the future, remember we were just talking about Cloud Pak. In the future, you can install it as part of Cloud Pak. Okay. Those are the two main options. There are some, I'll call them non-standard options. For example, I know there is a version of the TM1 database engine that runs in Linux. We have, by the way, well over 100 TM1 clients. I think we had one that had the database in Linux. It's very rare that people use that. So that's the database service. The TM1 web service, again, it's really geared towards a Windows implementation. Okay, so it uses what's called WebSphere, which is IBM's web server. Before, it used to use a more open source web server called Apache Tomcat, but they've shifted over and now they're using IBM WebSphere. It's still just as easy to set up as it was before. It works exactly the same way. I've seen no differences whatsoever. So you can install this either completely standalone on its own server, right? Or you can install it alongside the TM1 database on one box, or you could install it with the workspace server. And we'll talk about that in a minute, the PAW server. On the TM1 web service, one important thing to note is that you are able to do things like load balance. So that, that's pretty common with our customers, where they want a couple of web servers, and then they have a load balancer that as people want to get to TM1 web, it'll decide which of the TM1 web services to use. But Cloud Pak, I think they are announcing this month that they've migrated TM1 web also onto Cloud Pak. So that would be, I know before I was saying how limiting Cloud Pak is, in the very near future, I believe they're going to have TM1 web. And by the way, this is public information. what I just described. So it's IBM has webinars on this, but they are not giving dates for when these things are going to be available. So, but what I want to say about Cloud Pak for Data is that if you go that route in the future, that type of scaling is all built in. So if it needs multiple web services, it will create them. So it's a very good way to install the software in a scalable way. All right, the last piece, which is a big piece, it's called the PA Workspace or PAW server. You have lots of options for how you can install this. Okay, what we call the PAW server is actually a lot of components, between 25 and 30 little components. And those components might be a database, or it might be a web service, or it might be some sort of gateway. What IBM has done is they've combined all of them, and they've created a group of containers. And those containers can either be installed in Windows 2016 container facility, or they can be installed in Docker running on Linux. Okay, the recommended Linux is either Red Hat or CentOS. I have installed it in other flavors of Linux, but those are the two easiest for sure. And one interesting thing they did is that they created a scalable version of PAW using something called Docker Swarm. Docker Swarm is almost exactly the same thing as OpenShift, the thing that I mentioned before. My guess is that in the future, that option of using Docker Swarm, I think will not be as prevalent. For all I know, IBM might have an end of life for that. But I know that their direction, if you want to scale, will be Cloud Pak for Data, which makes a lot of sense in my mind. One thing that they're doing that I will be honest, I don't quite understand it. To me, it sounds like it's going in the opposite direction, is that they are creating a version of PAW that will run natively in Windows without the containers, right? That I've heard rumors that it will be out, or beta of it or something would be out this year. I'll be honest, I think that it will be less scalable. It's kind of a step backwards from a foundational standpoint. These other services, the future is really moving these other services into the containers alongside Workspace. All right, that's it. I'm going to stop talking techie. From here on, it's more about the business, and it's about how you can go about doing your upgrade or doing your migration. Okay, so let's talk about, let's break down the migration, right? I said before that it has a bunch of new features, new interfaces, and new features, but it also has all of the old features. I recommend to everybody on this call, if you have not done so already, that you really should move off of 10. Whatever and move up to Planning Analytics, okay? Even if you're doing what we call here just a basic upgrade. And I recognize that some of the people on this call have already done that, so they might be more interested in these other pieces. But in any case, you really should do this basic upgrade. It'll keep you in support. You'll still be able to use all your familiar interfaces. And in the short term, you won't have to train your users if they're used to using perspectives. But you have to think about where IBM is going with the product, and really where the power now. The product is a lot more powerful, and it is more powerful partly because of these new interfaces of Workspace and Planning Analytics for Excel. So What we recommend is either a 2 or 3 phase approach with doing the basic upgrade, then considering how you might move to planning analytics for Excel, and also either in a 3rd phase or part of that 2nd phase, also rolling out planning analytics workspace and maybe even hierarchies that I mentioned before. All right, so I'm going to quickly go through these slides. I kind of just did in my last slide, but this is a bit more detail. So when we do the basic upgrade, what we do is we install everything. And when I say everything, we install perspectives on the server and the TM1 web, but we also, 9 times out of 10 or more, 95 out of 100, whatever, we install the PAW server. Even if you don't think you're going to use PAX and PAW in the very short term, we recommend strongly you install it. That will give you a lot of flexibility moving ahead. You're also going to be able to start using some of the functionality. For example, the PAW server includes a very, very nice administration tool that you could start using the day you install it. If any of you are familiar with something called TM1 Top, it is the equivalent of that, but honestly much better. So some best practices here. If you're doing this minimal upgrade, you want to keep the changes to a minimum, meaning do the installation, migrate over your current database, and test that, right? Make sure that, get a comfort level that you're able to use the latest version of the software without mixing in any other changes, okay? We strongly recommend, IBM strongly recommends PAW to be installed on a separate server. I do have 1 or 2 clients that did install PAW on their TM1 server. It works, but typically you end up with resource issues, memory problems, etc. And the idea of this first phase is for you to plan and prepare for the upcoming phases. So for example, we typically will do PAX training for your power users during this phase, okay? The last note here, just if you haven't done it yet, you're upgrading from 10. Whatever, you're going to planning analytics, and you use single sign-on, a lot of our clients do, and you use TM1 Web, right? That combination, it is a hurdle. It does take an extra day or so to get TM1 single sign-on, TM1 Web single sign-on working properly. The single sign-on throughout the rest of the application works exactly as it did before. But with TM1 Web, there's a bit of a manual effort there that you have to go through. All right, moving on. The next stage is then taking your current reports, right, with all the DBRWs and perspectives, flavors to it, and you want to basically get them to work in planning analytics for Excel. If you are using Revelwood's Dynamo product, which is sold as part of Revelwood's toolkit, that product doesn't exist in planning analytics for Excel. So those reports would have to be converted. But if you're not using that, your existing reports should work absolutely fine in planning analytics for Excel. They might need a little bit of tweaking for performance reasons, but for the most part, they will work just by opening them up in the other tool. There are some exceptions, as I said, Dynamo, or if your code if your reports have VBA code that make calls into TM1, that would have to be handled. And any action buttons that you created in perspectives, there's an automated utility that you run that converts them for use in PACS. Okay. As for the rest of this slide, you can, it's kind of self-explanatory. The last item, it's at this point where Revelwood strongly recommends that you pause and you look at all the reports you have. I've had clients with well over 500 reports where they've really took a hard look at them and trimmed them down considerably, to, let's say, 250, which I know is still a lot, but 250 is not 500. So we strongly recommend that you pause when you're doing this and you think through the reports and you even think through your business processes. And it's an opportunity for you to fix maybe some things that are broken. All right, moving on. This last phase, again, I want to say a lot of people actually combine it with the prior one, but it's starting to look at your data models and say, well, wait a minute, could I use that hierarchies feature? And the key thing to look at is if you have cubes that are reporting cubes. And what I mean by that is many of our clients have, for example, a revenue cube that captures, let's say, product sales. But then they have a separate reporting cube that takes those sales and it breaks it out by the attributes of the product, right? Like, style. Let's say I always use the example of selling clothing, right? So if you're selling clothing and you have all those clothing related products and you have a reporting cube that kind of breaks down that data by style or by color or any of the other attributes of the product, that cube is 100% driven by the sales cube. It's just that you needed to create a new cube to allow for all these other dimensions you wanted to use. That hierarchies is designed to take care of that and to make it so that you don't even need that extra cube. Okay. The other thing, by the way, is dashboards, right? And Revelwood has done a lot with PAW over the last couple of years. We even created our own best practices for creating dashboards, and we have basically a methodology and a formula for trying to roll out dashboards and also train your company in how to create this. All right, almost done, by the way. Hopefully I'm doing okay. I think I'm doing okay on time. So let's talk about some other technical considerations that you should have in the back of your mind, okay? First one is authentication, right? So you want to just think through, okay, does my company use the native TM1 security? If so, that transfers over into the new world very smoothly. But it probably is time to think about that. I cannot tell you how many customers I've had where their auditing team has decided that the planning analytics security is not good enough. And there are reasons for that. I think IBM would very much agree that it's not a particularly secure way to log into a database. A lot of our clients, I'm going to say the majority, actually use Active Directory. And like I said, Active Directory works very well in the new environment. The only caveat is TM1 Web requires some extra care when trying to set that up with Active Directory. And then finally, for those of you who either use Cognos Analytics or the old Cognos BI, or have very specific security needs, we can use Cognos Access Manager as well. Second of all, if you're using TM1 applications, also known as contributor. IBM absolutely is not going to be moving ahead with that product line. I believe I have not seen anything about end of life for contributor, so it is in the product, but I know that it's not being updated at all. No enhancements there. Because if you think about it, TM1 Web does almost everything the contributor does, and once we have workflow, then contributors can have less. Basically, there won't be any reason to continue to use that old product. Quick shout out again, PA administration. The PAW tool is really, really powerful. It will monitor not just, it monitors who's logged in to your system. It monitors the memory usage of the system, the CPU, the disk space usage. It lets you kill processes. If somebody ran a TI process that for some reason is not finishing, it lets you kill it. It lets you, if you're working in PA Cloud, this same utility lets you start and stop TM1 servers, okay? Actually, not just if you're working in cloud. If you have it installed locally, you can also use this program to start and stop your servers. It finally, the one thing that I think is fantastic and really needed, it notifies you. All these things that I'm talking about watching memory and CPU, et cetera, the PA administration tool will write you an email, will send you an email saying that, for example, you have a TI process running on your production server that is so far taken more than 5 minutes. And you might have a rule that says, oh, well, none of our processes should take that long. And it's immediately a flag for you. And with any luck, you'll be able to fix whatever's broken before you start getting all the calls and the emails and people saying they can't get it. So first of all, that's great. Second of all, PA modeling. So I mentioned packs and perspectives. If you're familiar with perspectives, that is both used for reporting and for modeling. So that's the tool you use to update your dimensions and create new cubes and write rules and write TI processes. Well, in the future, now, there is via the workspace piece, there you have the capability to do all the things that I just talked about. You can write TI and test TI. And in fact, the TI editor and the rules editor are much nicer in the PAW interface. And by nicer, I mean it actually has color coding, and it will automatically tell you when you have something wrong in your code. It'll help you write it. I don't know about you guys, I don't memorize every single function in Turbo Integrator. So it's nice to be able to have at my fingertips, like kind of an auto fill-in. So as I start writing a TI call, it can help me finish it. So that's another really strong addition. And the last thing is, if you go to the PA Cloud, we definitely have to think about data integration. How will the cloud get data from, let's say, your local network or from another web offering that you use? And Revelwood has done a lot there. There are a lot of tools that IBM has for this, including something called Secure Gateway, another called Cognos Command Center. Anyway, there are loads of tools, and Revelwood can help you figure out, if you are thinking of going to the cloud, the best way to integrate. And finally, I want to probably reiterate a little bit. I've already talked about that idea of report cleanup. I strongly recommend that you do that as part of this migration that you might be undertaking. I also recommend that you pause and look at your system, right? And say, wait a minute, do I use all these cubes? Are my cubes and dimensions named properly? there's a lot of cleanup that this is a great opportunity to do that cleanup. And I talked about redefining planning processes along with cleaning up reports, et cetera. And then finally, training your users, right? This is a new opportunity. If you move to a new interface like PAX, you're going to want to train your users. But even if you're staying with perspectives, this is an opportunity to pause and ask yourself whether all of your users are well trained in the tool. And that, by the way, I want to mention the training goes beyond users, right? There's also training for modelers and for administrators, and Revelwood has all of that training. We have multiple classes for users in both perspectives and PAX. We have PAW training, we have administrator training, and we have developer training. So we can hit all those buttons for you. Okay, I have hit the end of my set of slides. I'm going to ask John to handle this last one and to kind of handle the end of this meeting. Sean? I think maybe he's on mute.
Yes, I was on mute there, and Eric has unmuted me, so thank you. I appreciate that. So Rob went over a bunch of the steps, and I just want to talk real quickly about what does Revelwood do? How can we help you out through all of this? So our program basically consists of 3 points. The first one being an impact plan or an impact planning call, which we have a free 1-hour call that we'll set up with you and your team to talk about your migration, your upgrade, and what it means to you specifically. Go over the topics and the different things that you'll have to look forward to and look at as it addresses your specific environment. So we'll go over all of those with you. We'll come up with a roadmap to do this, depending on how we do it, whether it's the simple upgrade, whether it's the migration. We'll work with you to create that roadmap so you'll have steps on exactly how we'll be doing it, how we'll be working with you, and what you can do as we go through this. And then we implement it. We work side by side with you to ensure a smooth upgrade path, as well as knowledge transfer, which is obviously critical through all projects. At this point, it's also a great time to look into and discuss our report conversion services, which address all of those issues that Rob mentioned earlier regarding not only converting your reports, but optimizing them to increase their accuracy, improve performance, as well as rationalizing reporting strategy. For example, do you really need all those reports? Should some of those be rendered in PAW versus Excel? Really make sure that you've got the correct reporting strategy to meet your business objectives. And for closing up, Rob, you can move over one. I want to thank everybody for attending today. I hope you found this informative. We look forward to working with you as you plan your migration to Planning Analytics. And this is really an important time because as TM1 support ended, like Rob mentioned, last September, it's critical to move forward with this. If you have any questions, like any more information, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to assist you. And I'd also like to invite you to go over to revelwood.com and view our Knowledge Center, where we've got a lot of information, not only on upgrades, but overall TM1 planning analytic topics, which you can delve into and look at. So again, we hope this was informative to you. If you've got any questions, please reach out to me, and thanks for your time today. Have a great day.